Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 424. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the program. We're not going to spend too much time with me monologuing today because our article is relatively long. Now, we've talked a lot about this subject that we're going to touch on tonight, and it's just more context to add to the story, right? We have an ongoing conversation here about the financial sector, Jeffrey Epstein, money laundering, and all of the other shady shit that goes around it. So, we're going to keep that conversation going tonight. We have an article from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists that touches on how reform is needed at the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network of the United States government. And while they passed, the AML laws, the anti-money laundering laws, all of this stuff needs to be updated, brought into the future, and these laws need to have some teeth. Because these scoundrels in the financial district, these people have been getting away with crimes of the century on a daily basis. So it would be nice to see some of these people held accountable for their financial crimes for once, wouldn't it? So hopefully, with the new money laundering law that they put into the books, hopefully with that law in place, it's going to give some teeth to all of this. And hopefully some of these people who are engaging in this behavior on basically a daily basis end up catching the karma train. Let's jump into the article and let's see what the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists have cooked up for us this time. Headline: Major reforms needed at struggling U.S. agency that leads dirty money fight, report says. A tech-driven Manhattan project at the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network is among significant reforms recommended by Anti-Money Laundering Group. Now, I think that's a good thing, right? There should be outside forces that are offering up some ideas, some plan maybe. Because what we have going on so far, that certainly isn't working, right? The people who are making these decisions so far, well, that certainly isn't working. So maybe we need some people on the outside, a watchdog type group, to help out. And I say this all the time. There needs to be more citizen oversight of our government. And I think that, something like that would be absolutely fantastic, to be honest with you. Because who is watching the watchers, right? Who's, keeping an eye on these people? We know that they can't be trusted. We know that everything that they have done and everything that they have said it's all set up for their friends, right? It's not set up for the rest of us. And we see the impact all of this money laundering has. All you have to do is just read through the articles and you can see the absolute impact on the poorest amongst us that this sort of behavior has. And it's just so sad that this was the vehicle used by Jeffrey Epstein, and right in everybody's face, right? They love that. They love to be brazen right under your nose. And they used the system that was put into place by the politicians, and they navigated that system with the help of their friends, obviously, and they were able to fund a human sex trafficking ring that ran for decades. I'm talking 4 different presidencies. And you don't think we need more regulation? This article was authored by Michael Hudson and Ben Hallman. To keep from falling further behind in the battle against criminal money and terrorism financing, the United States must remake the federal agency at the center of the fight, according to a new report that draws on the views of top anti-money laundering experts. Yeah, that's a good idea. It needs to be reformed, right? let's audit it. Let's have an internal audit. And I don't mean financially. I'm talking about the personnel there. Let's audit it. Let's see who's good at their job, who's not good at their job. Let's see if there's anybody corrupted, and let's have a full accounting of what's going on. From top to bottom, obviously this whole thing needs to be reformed. The U.S. Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, known in shorthand as FinCen, is underfunded and overstretched in its role as a leading player in the global effort to catch money launderers and other sophisticated financial criminals who use shell companies, cryptocurrency, and other tools to hide their activities, the nonprofit anti-corruption group Global Financial Integrity says. Well, we've talked about this for months now, right? About how the FinCen department is woefully understaffed, woefully underprepared to deal with the absolute malfeasance going on in the financial sector. Perhaps a whole new department needs to be made. Get rid of FinCen and put something else in its place, something that has the ability to actually capture some people doing some bad stuff here. Because it seems to me that the FinCen enforcement division is about as effective as TSA. I mean, how many terrorists has the TSA captured? Not many. Probably none, if my memory is serving me correctly. Now, they fondled a bunch of people, right? But this agency here that we're talking about, FinCen, it is obviously not functioning correctly. And whether that be a personnel issue, a financing issue, mixture of both, or whatever else it may be, they need to figure it out. It is an agency that is struggling to meet the nation's emerging money laundering challenges of the coming decade and beyond, the report says. But it adds that the U.S. government should not see these realities as acceptable and impervious to change. That's for sure. We should never just accept this kind of thing, right? I mean, what's the point in that? What's the point in having a functioning government if we're just going to accept corruption and the fact that there's not going to be any enforcement on the financial sector? Really? I think the whole point is people just didn't really know the extent, right? People truly didn't understand the extent of what was going on in the financial sector. Oh, sure, we all paid attention a little bit, right? When a story popped up like Bernie Madoff or something like that. But nobody's really has the time to get down into the weeds and into the particulars of what these people are up to on Wall Street and how they're moving their money through LLCs and shell companies and all sorts of other wild shit. Well, then we got locked in our houses for a year. And boy, has that flipped the script or what? The report urges the government to boost FinCen's funding and to embrace fundamental changes in how the agency operates. It proposes, for example, that FinCen launch a Manhattan Project to develop new ways to use data and cutting-edge technology to fight financial crime. Well, yeah, why wouldn't we be using everything at our disposal to try and curb this? It's a huge problem. I mean, and not just in America, it's a huge problem everywhere. The financial system is the lifeblood for all of these criminal enterprises. What do you think? They're just showing up with Versace bags all the time? Yeah, low-level street dealers are doing that. But the real criminals, the real crooks, well, they're using the banking system right under your nose. Anti-money laundering efforts by the U.S. government and the banks it oversees are widely seen as inefficient and ineffective, the report says, citing the FinCen Files investigation by BuzzFeed News, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, and other media partners worldwide, which revealed that major banks had continued to profit from suspect transactions even after authorities had fined them for compliance failures. So we have seen a bunch of that, right? There's no doubt we have seen more than our fill of that nonsense with Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan, all of these banks that were in on it with Jeffrey Epstein, all of these banks that fattened their pocket with Jeffrey Epstein, and all of these executives really who are facilitating it. Those are the people who need to be under the microscope. Because, let's be real, we know who was giving Jeffrey Epstein loans. We know who was paying him on the cuff. We know who he was working with. All of this stuff is public record. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of people we don't know who he was in business with, I'm sure. There's probably a darker ledger, shall we say. But from the circumstantial evidence that is provided to us, it is rather clear what these people were up to. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime has estimated that authorities detect less than 1% of the world's dirty money. Think about that for a minute, folks. They only detect 1% of the world's dirty money. So that means 99% of this laundered money. 99% of this washed money. 99% of this stolen money goes undetected. Now, does it go undetected because they just are overmanned and they don't know what they're doing? The understaffed, whatever it may be? Or are there a few players involved that might be helping it out a little bit, right? Directing things a bit. Because that's how these things work, right? It's not the guy on the front line. What these people do is they get somebody in a management position, somebody that can facilitate their moves, and they get them on the hook. And then that person's job is to make sure everything runs smoothly. Make sure everything goes according to plan. And if you can do that, well, I'm going to give you a bunch of money. And that was the way Jeffrey Epstein operated. We see that with all of the payouts, all of the people that he was given money to keep quiet, and especially with Indike and Khan. The Global Financial Integrity Report, released Monday, notes that the estimate is a decade old, but says there is little evidence to suggest that the effectiveness of anti-money laundering efforts have substantially improved since then. Well, obviously they haven't. I mean, every time you turn around, there's another hedge fund scumbag who's up to no good. And even the ones who are in business, how many of them have already been popped for trade crimes and money crimes? And, they just get a slap on the wrist, though. If it was you or me, or even someone like Martha Stewart, you're going to prison. But not if you're a hedgie. Not if you're Steve Cohen's boys. Not if you work for Citadel. Certainly not if you work for Apollo Global. FinCen is well positioned to crack down on criminal money flows because American law requires banks and other financial firms with operations in the U.S. to file suspicious activity reports whenever they spot transactions that have the hallmarks of illicit activity. So we've discussed the suspicious activity reports a lot here. And as you all know who have been listening to the podcast, I actually have a lot of experience with those considering my old job. Now, we would have to turn those bad boys in all the time. And even when I was training for that job, when we were with compliance and going through all of it, they said majority of these SARs never even get looked at or anything. And it's basically just a cover your ass situation, right? Oh, you throw your hands up in the air. Whoa, I put that SAR in. What do you mean? Nobody checked it? So it's basically, the circular cover your ass situation that they have going on, and there's really no real enforcement. But the agency receives more than 2 million of these alerts each year. That number has zoomed upward over the past decade, and FinCen's staffing, budgets, and technology have failed to keep pace. Many suspicious activity reports simply go uninvestigated or even unread. Absolutely. Like I was just saying a second ago, that's for sure. And the compliance people that did our training even told us that. So I was saying to myself, what in the hell is the point of even putting them in, right? If they're just going to be ignored, there's no sense in even bothering put them in. But obviously, cover your ass, make sure the company doesn't get in trouble, and that's what it's all about. It's all about saving face with the elites and with the companies that they own. The group also urges the government to give FinCen's director a seat on the National Security Council's Deputies Committee and create a strategic analysis team within FinCen that would examine emerging and long-term trends in money laundering methods and computer technologies to counter those threats. How is that not a good idea? Put him on that committee. Let him have a few things to say. I mean, if we have, I'm sure we have somebody from every walk of life involved in some committee in Washington, D.C. So what would it hurt to have this guy, someone like keeping an eye on all of this, a strategic analysis team, and give the person a director seat on the National Security Council? Not a bad idea. Then he has access to the president's staff. He has access to the full government. And if something needs to get moved or shook, well, he's right there and has the access to do so. And at least it avoids one lever of the bureaucracy. The report calls for significantly more funding and an expanded workforce to better prepare FinCen for a new generation of threats. It notes that since 2015, despite a consistently growing workload, the agency's budget increased by just 3% in inflation-adjusted dollars. That's not going to get it done. Okay? That's not going to get it done. The way we spend money in this country, if we got money to send to other countries for insert craziness here, then we damn sure have enough money to make sure that the money moving through our financial system is not corroded and corrupted and completely black. How about just doing the right thing, huh? How about some regulations, some good old regulations that actually mean something? Cardamone said the report is not meant to be a cudgel to beat up on FinCen. Instead, he said it's a call to action to push for better resources and better strategies that will help FinCen. Law enforcement agencies and banks step up efforts to staunch the flow of dirty money around the world. And yeah, I agree with that. There's no reason to pile on FinCen. The average person who works for the FinCen department is probably a good person, I'm sure, just wants to go and do their job every day. But again, when we're talking about the bureaucracy, we're talking about big trouble. It's never a good thing in a big bureaucracy like this because there's no responsibility. Nobody takes the blame for anything. Oh, they want the glory, all right, but nobody wants to take the blame. Just look at what happened with Epstein. In September, after BuzzFeed, ICIJ, and other media partners informed U.S. Treasury officials of the FinCen Files investigation's findings, FinCen announced it was seeking recommendations on new regulations that would help the agency address the evolving threats of illicit finance. I mean, it shouldn't take a media investigation to get these guys kicked into gear, should it? They should have been doing their job from the jump. But it took this investigation by BuzzFeed and by the ICIJ to get this kind of movement. And again, we see it takes pressure from the public and from a fourth estate that actually wants to do their job to get things changed. And unfortunately, with this Jeffrey Epstein case, the fourth estate, the legacy media, well, we all know that they have not been around. In December, Congress passed the Corporate Transparency Act, which requires many U.S. companies to report their true owners to FinCen, with the aim of discouraging the abuse of anonymous shell companies. The legislation also provided for a modest $10 million bump in FinCen's annual budget allocation, which was $126 million in the budget year ending September 2020. So, a little $10 million bump, what's that going to do? Again, with all the money that's being spent in this country, what's the point of holding on to a couple extra bucks at this point? Let's get all of this stuff brought into the 21st century. The panel of experts who informed Global Financial Integrity's report didn't take a position on what FinCen's budget should be, but did agree that its current funding level is far too low to provide the staff, skills, and technologies needed for today's challenges, let alone those of the 2030s. So it's quite obvious, folks, to us to the professionals and to anyone else who's paying attention that the financial system has to be fixed. You can contact me at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, everybody, I will be back tomorrow, and we will pick this up where we left off.